The transition over to AWS was also very good, as that gave me the opportunity to do a piece of what I was doing for Oracle, but to do it for one of the fastest moving companies in the world. When people ask me, what exactly do you do? I say in one phrase, I acted as CEO of the R&I ecosystem.
Demetris Skourides is the chief scientist of the Republic of Cyprus, appointed by His Excellency President Nikos Christodoulidis, a former tech executive where he previously worked at AWS as an industry strategist and has been instrumental in leading the pivot of Oracle's partner ecosystem in EMEA.
I truly believe that by 2035, we do have the possibility of having maybe 2 unicorns and a decacorn in Cyprus. When people ask me right now, how many languages do you speak? I say 4, right? And when they say, really? I said, well, yes, 1 is Greek, 1 is English, 1 is private sector, and 1 is public sector, right? So,
with over 300 plus keynotes, having coached 100 plus startups, engaged with 1,000 plus customers, and engaged with world leaders, presidents, ministers focused on driving sustainable change, he is now focused on the digital transformation journey of the Republic of Cyprus.
Could you explain what these initiatives entail, why they're important for the Cyprus ecosystem, for startups, for SMEs, and are there any partnerships that people need to be aware of?
That's a very, I think, good question.
Mr. Dimitri, thank you for coming. Thank you. Welcome to the Beyond Limits podcast. It's great to have you. So thank you for making the time and being here with us.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's my pleasure.
So Mr. Dimitri, you're the chief scientist of the Republic of Cyprus and the chairman of the Research and Innovation Foundation, a position which in my view is one of the most important roles of the government, not only for its vision, but also in its role in driving technological change. And especially at this day and age, I think we are witnessing true change across the globe. And it's important for Cyprus to also, be involved in that change. And when we first met last week at the Cyprus Diaspora Forum, and you told me about your story and how you decided to move back to Cyprus to pursue this position, it was clear to me that you wanted to do it for the love that you have for your country. Which was something that I hugely admired. But before we dive into kind of your current role, I would like to go slightly back and talk through your experience. You have had an international career with Oracle, which was 14 years, if I'm correct, where you led the establishment of cloud partner centers across EMEA and APAC. And most recently also you worked at AWS for a little bit as an industry strategist. So I would like to ask you first about Oracle, where you had kind of your longest tenure. How was it climbing the ranks at the company, the likes of Oracle, which is undeniably now one of the most important firms in the AI kind of ecosystem?
Thank you very much, I think, for the question. So it's been around 16 and a half years with Oracle. I started at 2006 in July, and I left basically end of October in 2022. So Oracle, my time at Oracle started from pivoting from the Cyprus Organization of Standardization. So before I joined Oracle, I actually did work for 2 organizations in Cyprus. One was private sector organization, where I actually was implementing, solutions as a consultant that were serving customers like the Bank of Cyprus and the budgeting and the forecasting system, or the national payment system for OGA, Organismos Georgikis Asfalisios, and a few others. And then I transitioned for a bit less than 2 years at the Cyprus Organization for Standardization, where I worked with the teams, internationally on the ISO standards, ISO 27001, TCLI for lawful interception, I believe it's 289, and a few others. Now, joining Oracle in 2006 was a remarkable change, because I got to move from implementation consultants to strategy and R&D, and working on strategies, to actually building an ecosystem, a channel, what was referred to back then. And I started from a very small territory called Cyprus and Malta. By the time that I left, basically Oracle, I had already managed teams across 100 plus countries. That was EMEA plus Asia Pacific, which was a tremendous challenge and a great opportunity in terms of learning how to work with different cultures, fast-paced cultures, industries, working with global system integrators, having the opportunity to lead the solution engineering teams for the ISVs, independent software vectors, and vendors. And basically, I would say that I was very privileged to see an entire metamorphosis of the industry, meaning we went from, I believe, the first phase into building what we call the engineered systems. Then we focused on the middleware. Then we focused on the cloud. And that transition, those were three mega transitions in the industry that helped us move from where we were, back then in monolithic or let's say client web type of technologies to where we are right now with, solutions, right, running, full agentic or, AI powered. So that was a very, very good experience. The transition over to AWS was also very good, as that gave me the opportunity to do a piece of what I was doing for Oracle, but to do it for one of the fastest moving companies in the world. And that opportunity, being the industry strategist for the GSIs and the commercial sectors in AWS was also a very different experience. And I think one of the two takeaway messages that I took away in lessons is that on one side, you have to teach yourself to be agile. But on the other side, you have to teach yourself how to be adaptable and when you actually have to make decision making. So, transitioning from Oracle, where I was an executive, into AWS, where I had to, get trained on their mindset, right? The one-way doors and the two-way doors and the two pizza teams was a mind-blowing, I think, experience. And it really helped me look at problems from a different mindset. And I think that's what makes, I think, the beautiful world of what we experience today, the ability to, see different challenges from a different perspective. Not everything is right or wrong, right? But you just have to calibrate the mindset and see how that creates growth.
That's awesome, Mr. Dimitri. Congratulations. And I wanted to ask you actually, because you studied computer science, right?
Yes, I did start with computer science.
So moving from computer science to kind of more of a strategic role and leading a lot of kind of the cloud infrastructure across Oracle and then potentially AWS, becoming an industry strategist there, how did the skills that you had, because obviously you had more of a technical background at university and then you moved on a front-facing, in my understanding, role?
Well, I mean, so this is I think one of the main I think dilemmas that most people have. Do you stay technical or do you become more strategic? From my perspective, up until 2012, I did invest a lot in the technical side. So, ex-Oracle, let's say, certified associate on the database, ex-Sun certified architect, Sun certified Java developer, computer scientist, and developer, coder. Eventually, slowly started transitioning to the executive part through different, let's say, opportunities that the company had given me. But at the same time, while I did become an executive, I actually did go through the cloud practitioner for the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure or the, let's say, the Amazon Cloud, the AWS Cloud Practitioner. And I think that in today's world, every executive needs to be both. And if you're both and you have that hybrid persona where you could understand both worlds, it's much easier for you to be able to feel, if your organization is changing fast enough, if there is inertia, if you're losing an opportunity. And that's why I consider, the system architects or the system operators for me is a new breed of leaders that are the people who are very good at both, right? And they can wear one hat or one another. And that's where you see people like, you would see people, for example, like Elon Musk or, I think Larry Ellison. I think they're the prime examples of this mentality. They can be very good on, the executive part, but at the same time, they can be, they can go from 30,000 feet down to day zero, right? And really talk about technology in bits and bytes. And I think that creates a tremendous advantage for companies.
I think that is spot on. And the reason why I asked is because I myself studied engineering and I went on to do strategy consulting in corporate strategy and macroeconomics, which I didn't really have any background. But a lot of the skills that I had, and as you said, like understanding the details and the adaptable skills that engineering has taught me, really positioned me really well for my job afterwards. And so this is something that probably has helped you as well throughout your career, knowing the technical part, but then, as you said, being agile and learning along the way during your Oracle career and implementing those learnings.
Yes, I think, it's important. It's important to be, I think, skilled enough to be able to walk, both paths. But at the same time, I think when you end up becoming a leader or an executive or even a strategist, you really need to be able to step back and really call on a leadership blind spot. And I'll give you an example. Less than 2 months ago, I was in an event in Brussels with the European female founders, and a lady challenged me and said, you know what? Ladies and female-led companies are actually creating a tremendous value when they actually step out, right? But the actual percentage of lady founders that are succeeding through pre-seeds and seeds is very, very low. Why do you think this gender inequality exists? And I said to her, it's a mindset problem. And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, ladies in general are, very, very good at making decisions. They're very analytical. They take the time to really make sure that the decision framework works. And when you actually are building a startup that, has months before, the actual, let's say, budget burns out, right? Or you don't have cash. You don't have that endless luxury of time to be able to contemplate a decision, right? And you have to be nimble in really making those decisions. And I think that is a part that, sometimes comes into conflict. So for us to make sure that we have this phenomenal, great leaders that are ladies to be able to be more successful, we may need to really look at how do we really, I think, create all things equal for them to be able to succeed, right? Because it's a completely different competency and a capability. So I think, when you wear one hat versus the other, you need to really approach it with the mindset that is required for you to be able to be successful. And obviously, I think this engineering excellence and attention to detail, I think, is adjustable and portable to many, many other industries and professions.
Spot on. And Mr. Demetris, I wanted to ask, because of your vast experience, right, in the private sector, what are the key learnings out of, your 20-plus year career that you have taken and implemented them in the public sector? Because obviously the dynamics between the private and the public sector must be completely different, right? So what are the key things that you have taken and are using them now?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me start by saying that, when people ask me right now, how many languages do you speak? I say 4, right? And when they say, really? I said, well, yes, one is Greek, one is English, one is private sector, and one is public sector, right? So they're very, very different. Now, going back to your question, we can talk about the lessons that, you can learn in private sector and bring over to the public sector. And there are also lessons that you will learn in public sector and bring them to private sector. But I think the key ones that I would really, how do we call it, single out is number one, in the private sector, for us to be successful, we have to go together as a team, and you have to build these high performing teams that basically can actually, get things done in very, very, I think, challenging timelines. It's the same thing with the public sector. However, you have to find those motivational factors that will motivate the people surrounding you for them to perform as a star, right? So I think that ability in the private sector, where you don't have an option to fail, right? Transporting it into the public sector translates into really, being self-aware of your environment, but at the same time, making sure that you're developing those relationships so that projects don't fail. That's number one. Number two is make sure that you invest in, mentoring and coaching the people around you, because they are going to be the people who are going to help you navigate a very complex system. In private sector, yes, you do have directions coming in from a CEO or a chairman of a board, and you drive the business. But in the public sector, everything is weaving into guidelines, regulations, policies, right? That are I think the everyday fabric of how these living organizations live, right? So it's not easy for a person who comes from the outside to be able to know how to navigate them all, and you would need these ecosystems around you. So the learning was because just like in the private world, we develop relationships and partnerships that basically help us succeed. It's the same thing in the public sector. Is you have to be able to identify the people who know the system, who know the guidelines, who know the policies that can be your, let's say, your North Star when you move into that. Another thing that basically was very important for me was the speed and the urgency to move, right? So I still try to operate within the public sector on a corporate hyperscaler mode, meaning at a frenetic tempo. And the reason is because I was always taught in my life at Oracle and AWS that every minute counts, right? And when you have quotas and those targets are big, you need to make them. And on the same time, right, when you bring this attitude and I think this leadership principle over to public sector, the other item is basically that you can't succeed, you cannot stop not delivering something, but if you actually tell yourself that you're actually creating a change that will systematically, I think impact people, society, and everybody else, then it's like a KPI you have in delivering revenue for corporate. So I think it's finding those metrics and those missions that will make your mission as a public sector, I think servant resound well. And I think the two additional ones that I would actually say is highlight is one, trust and integrity are very, very big. And when you are a public sector servant, it's very important to really make sure that everything you commit to is delivered, that trust is being built, because trust is the only currency that, I think creates value. So that's, again, a portable lesson coming in from my experience in the private world. And I think the ability and the understanding of the mechanics of how do you develop trust, how do you develop character of people around, how do you develop your character, right, to be able to operate under pressure. And the last one, which is also very important for me, is no never means no. Right, it's the same thing when you're trying to bring a major opportunity or a major breakthrough, right? And you come across a stakeholder who just says no. It doesn't just mean that no is a no. It means that it's no today. So apply that into the public sector, and slowly, right? You see that you can really open doors and make things happen as long as you're persistent enough to look at things from very different perspectives until you can actually lock eye with your I think your counterpart or your stakeholder on the public policy perspective, where they can understand you. And I think these are very, very valuable lessons.
Well, Mr. Demetris, thank you for that. For me, something that you said, which really struck me, is the fact that while in the public sector, you're not setting KPIs, for example, in terms of revenue or profit, because it's a public sector, you still have to put some KPIs in terms of vision. And that is probably what people will follow if you have a clear vision and they understand that they're doing something for your country, for the good of the people, and being a good public servant, as you said, is what could drive better results. And that is very, very important.
Yeah, I would say, just to make sure that we don't miss this point, because it's very important. We shouldn't say, it's wrong to say that public service and, sector doesn't have KPIs. They do have KPIs. What I'm saying is that the KPIs and the nature of the KPI is more linked to societal impact, right? Mm-hmm. Or let's say something that will basically change maybe the quality of life of a citizen, etc. So it's important for a professional to be able to really understand the impact of the work that they are creating, right? And that basically translates to how much value am I creating today, right? Mm-hmm. And if I'm creating enough value today because I'm really solving the right problems, or really introducing and working hard on the right policies that are going to make Cyprus, I think, a very positive place to live, work, and do business in, then I'm contributing to the vision, right? I'm contributing to basically changing the culture and really creating an environment where people can, I think, live, work, and grow their families in.
100%. And Mr. Demetris, the chief scientist role itself is a relatively new role, right? It has been, I think the first appointee was in 2019.
Yes.
And for the role itself is very integral in the research and innovation governance systems. And I think you hold a few other roles, including being the chairman of the Research and Innovation Foundation. For those that do not know what the mission of your role is, how would you explain it?
Well, in simple terms, when people ask me what exactly do you do, I say in one phrase, I act as the CEO of the R&I ecosystem, and the reason I say that is the chief scientist for research, innovation, and technology, which is an expanded remit, is a role basically that works, as you said, within the governance of the ecosystem. So acts as an advisor to the president, His Excellency, and also to the minister, His Excellency, in basically providing that policy advisory, that advice basically that is required to develop a vibrant research and innovation ecosystem. But at the same time, the chief scientist also is the chairman of the National Research Innovation Foundation, which is an independent foundation, the only foundation in Cyprus that is a funding agency that basically supports competitive research. The chief scientist also happens to be the chairman of the interministerial R&D committee of the country. So what that essentially means is that once we have a research and innovation strategy, which we have at the level of our deputy ministry of research policy and innovation, to take that document and really make sure that each ministry is slowly adopting the strategy and implementing that strategy, we have this coordination body that which overviews the strategy and is really pushing it into that direction. And that is the chairman of the interministerial committee. The chief scientist also chairs the National AI Task Force. What we've done here is, although by mandate the chief scientist has the responsibility of updating and making sure that the revised strategy for artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies, be it IoT or blockchain, are revised, what we've done as government is we've expanded that into a responsibility of a task force, and we've brought in, I think, very decorated researchers, academics, foresight leaders, strategists, and even lawyers, where we together, look at holistically how Cyprus needs to change for it to be able to harness artificial intelligence. And, when you have a team like that of people that are, I think many of the people we have there are on the top 2% of the Stanford list, which means they're good. You really have a team that can help you see things that you wouldn't see with your naked eye. And in addition to that, the chief scientist represents Cyprus on the European Scientific Advisory Forum, ESAF. Currently now with the presidency, I also act as the vice chairman of the European ESAF Forum, and I also represent Cyprus on the board of governors for the Joint Research Council, which is a science for policy, let's say, a group that basically creates, I think, the evidence-based requirements and then insight that is required by the European Council as they look into policies. And of course, there are a few other things that you see in my daily role as chairman when I do travel abroad, preparing the room for MOUs with other nations, speaking allocations, and then really promoting and internationalizing our ecosystem. Hope that answers your question.
It does, and it sounds like a very interesting, but also very strategic role, which kind of ties well with your experience in the past. But I wanted to ask, actually, what does your day-to-day look like? Because it seems like there's so many connecting dots. Is every single day different for you, or is there something that you're doing on a day-to-day basis that you would like to share with us?
Well, I mean, every day is different, depending on the news in the world, and where, scientists go and what we're looking at, So, for example, at the same time, you will find, a trendy thing about, nuclear energy and people looking at, how do they power all of the data centers. And on the other side, again, on the technology side, you see things like, the data centers and the sovereign data centers, and then you explode into a different discussion, which is the sovereign LLMs, or I would call it, the single shot LLMs. And then you stop here for a second, and then you have to go into a completely different realm. So let me give you an example. During the Diaspora Forum, which was running on the, 7th and 8th of May, where we met, on the second day, I started being on a panel on healthcare. My second, let's say, intervention was a dialogue with the deputy minister, where we talked about, the digital policy, how Cyprus is progressing under his leadership, etc. Immediately after that, I, changed roles, and I was on a far side discussion with the ex-minister of Australia of Innovation, where we talked about, what is Cyprus doing to become a hub, and how is that, working for us. And immediately after that, as we finished, we had to transition into another power panel where we were talking about India and Cyprus and the business being, moving together. And that finishes. So that's 4, let's say, panels in a row. And we then dive into a podcast series with 2 decorated, let's say, I think, scientists. Dr. Pandelis Theocharous, a clinical hematologist, oncologist, and a biotech and entrepreneur, and Dr. Nicolas Diedis, who's basically a clinical pharmacologist who basically is working on a very pioneering project right now, where we're preparing a platform leveraging zebrafish, which I think are a great asset for us to be able to really test how do they respond, to specific type of medication, and all of that to treat bioglastomas, right, or glistomas. So you can understand that in just one day there were, I think 5-6 different mega tracks, or let's say chunks of work that required, the thinking to completely switch off from one area into another. And this is something that is happening on a daily basis.
Wow. And that is the beauty of technology, because it's implemented across so many verticals. And it makes me wonder, Mr. Demetri, how are you able to keep up with being knowledgeable enough to kind of sit with so many experts across so many industries? What is your perspective there? How do you approach these kinds of meetings?
Well, first of all, let me just, I think, address one of the things you just said, right? You said technology, right, is adjustable across everything. So technology is an enabler, right? But it's not just as transferable to say that because you understand tech, you can walk into a room and you can talk about, brain cancer, you can talk about, any other disease or any other initiative. I think that type of skill is built when you actually spend time building, your skill set and your knowledge in areas that you don't have that capability. For me, it was developed gradually over my career at Oracle, because I had to, every year do a different role. And, that helped me create a massive amount of, I think, resilience, flexibility, the ability to learn and unlearn new things very, very fast, which I think is a very powerful, I think, characteristics and a technique for a leader to have. So for me, the reality is that I invest in reading about 7 books to, I think 60% completion per month.
Wow.
The way that I do it is I basically spend 45 minutes a day per book, right? And it's not just, read the whole book in one go. So it's 45 minutes, one book, 45 another, 45 another. And that, I think that amount of time, which is approximately, I would say 2 hours and 15 minutes, right? That time allows me to really stretch my mind and to be able to transition from this to that in a much easier way. So creating that opportunity for your brain to be accustomed to, that bridging or that synapse, when you have those neurons firing up is very important. And you can only develop that if you really practice, if you really read diverse literature. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Mr. Demetri. And since we mentioned the Diaspora Forum, I was also part of the diaspora. I recently moved back to Cyprus, but I wanted to share this because a lot of times the Cypriots of the diaspora feel more love to Cyprus and they feel more pain sometimes to Cyprus. And you were also part of the diaspora, but you moved back, you wanted to give back to your country. How is that shift for you moving back to Cyprus and taking such an important role in the transformation of Cyprus? And what are the key takeaways that you've had through taking that role?
Well, I think a message for me as a professional, right? Not wearing the hat of the chief scientist and the chairman of the National Research Innovation Foundation. It's very easy to look from an outside window, right, and criticize things that aren't working and say, hey, we did them. They work like this. And for example, another country, why can't they work home in a different way? So basically for me, I always had the passion to give back, right? I think that I'm privileged to have had the opportunity to go to great schools, to, I think grow up in an environment that was safe, secure, right? I mean, healthcare pretty accessible, the opportunity to travel, right, with family. So, sometimes people forget, how important it is that we have a nationality, right? That you can basically travel across almost all countries in the world without having a hard time, or being able to speak fluent English, right? Which puts you in a compatibility zone with most of the countries of the world. So I think that for me, at some point of time after achieving what I achieved in my career, it was more about now is the time to come back and try to help create the conditions in the system that can actually help others, right? If we can actually get to the point where we optimize, I would say, the scheduling of the healthcare appointments by 10% or 20%, that's huge, right? That means that potentially, right, X amount of people are going to have healthcare in time, which means that they won't get as sick, which means that, we won't impose more taxation onto a system. So there are many such examples that, for me, they were, I think, so dear to my heart that, I think they were worth, stepping out of my, I think ivory world or tower into an opportunity where I could actually lead, right, and take the responsibility for fixing things.
Thank you, Mr. Dimitri, for sharing that. And since you've mentioned kind of your vision and your contribution, and I've heard you talk about Cyprus Vision 2035 before, and in making Cyprus kind of the hub for research and innovation, could you explain what that entails? What is Vision 2035?
So first of all, that is not my vision. That's the vision of the president of the government. Our vision, right, Cyprus Vision 2035, is all about making Cyprus one of the safest places to live, work, and do business with, right? A country that is inclusive, a country that has opportunity, a country that, I think provides an easier framework for people to connect with each other. Now, each ministry has an implementation plan, right, that basically, contributes to that mission. For us, under the Deputy Ministry of Digital Policy, Research and Innovation, our passion is to make sure that Cyprus is going to become a research and innovation and a technology hub, right? So breaking it down very easy, for you to become a hub, you need to have more companies than what you have today. For you to become a hub, you need to work with, companies where you have bilaterals, but they have an interest in working with you, right? If that relationship is symbiotic, meaning that, you're working with partners who can take from you but can also give you back, then you have the opportunity to continuously evolve. And that's what we're busy actually doing under the Research and Innovation Strategy 2024 to 2026. One of the 4 pillars is internationalization. So the ability to really place Cyprus on the world map, right, to make sure that Cyprus is there so that the rest of the world also knows that, Cypriot companies, Cypriot researchers, Cypriot talent is very good. And that is to the extent that you may have seen some of my travels across the globe I have, on one side, develop the relationship to a point where we have an MOU upcoming. On a second perspective, to be able to really develop those conditions so when those countries become associate or full members of EU Horizon, that, institutions from Cyprus could work with other institutions in other countries, be it, for example, the University of Melbourne or the University of or Michigan or MIT or any other university in the world, right? So I think, being able to see things and be able to walk at them faster is something that, I thought that it was very, very important to deliver on that cause.
And to your point, Mr. Dimitris, and to the vision of His Excellency, the Mr. President of the Republic of Cyprus, it's evident that Cyprus is making steps into creating more partnerships, and a lot of us are seeing online the steps that are being taken. And I have here some initiatives that I have seen, for example, Pharos CY, as well as a recent partnership with NVIDIA. Could you explain what these initiatives entail, why they're important for the Cyprus ecosystem, for startups, for SMEs, and are there any partnerships that people need to be aware of?
Well, thank you very much. I think that's a very, very, I think, good question. let me just retract for a second, and I heard you say steps. The steps that have been made under this presidency and under the leadership of our president have never been made, I think, in our history, right? I mean, we have never had a president who actually went right to the US to talk to the Googles, the Amazons, the Microsofts, the OpenAIs, the Oracles, the ServiceNows, right, and others. We have never had, that passion to really build, a series of investments that basically are going to bring back, I think, not only FDI, foreign direct investment, but also, potential and jobs created that, would allow, for example, Cypriots like you and me when we were diasporians to be able to come back and really have an opportunity to work. So building on what I just said, right, as part of that, yes, there are a series of interventions that are opening the door. So we have an upcoming, let's say, cooperation with OpenAI, potentially being able to use some of their technology when it comes, to on the training. That's a pilot. We have the Pharos CY, which basically is a part of the AI Factory project, which will allow our researchers to be able to access, AI compute to be able to carry out the research. That is important because slowly, it will help us consolidate some of the infrastructure in one space, making it easier for us to manage, right? I mean, managing AI chips as they run can become too costly. We have, for example, the NVIDIA story where with the corporation, we've modernized and we are modernizing basically the hypercompute instance that we have at the Institute of Cyprus. And we also have, I think we're lucky to have, all of that enablement and training that is being planned to come in, right, to really get people to really, I think, skill up on the NVIDIA stack. We have the MOU signed by myself and I think the legendary Jim Keller, which basically allows us or creates the opportunity for Cyprus to be able to design solutions for sovereign usage, right? And when we're talking about sovereign on chips, no, we're not going to be producing chips, but we can co-design with them specific type of chiplets that are going to be, for example, our blueprint for, the next maritime USV, or the next, for example, drone that we may want, or even, for example, the next autonomous bus, right? And I think that one alone, right, the partnership with a legendary company like that, not only brings, I think, tremendous potential to Cyprus, it also brings the opportunity to really update and modernize our own, let's say, curriculum. So, I mean, it's not a secret that Cyprus doesn't produce chip engineers or doesn't produce, systems engineers at that level. I mean, we do have, I think, world-class talent like Dr. Julius Georgiou, who's at the University of Cyprus, who's, I think, doing great work. But I mean, our curriculum at universities isn't oriented to produce, that world-class computer systems engineer who becomes a system architect and then design chips. So the cooperation with Tenstorrent is a very, very good opportunity because it's already led to universities like the PAC to be able to modernize part of their syllabus, right, so that they can actually start focus on developing talent there. Tenstorrent was actually very, very bullish and they wanted to hire people from Cyprus. So they asked us, for a list of the top talent that could become the next employees. 3 have already started, right? We gave them a list of about 20 minds who are outside Cyprus, right? Very, very good candidates coming from Intel, from NVIDIA, from AMD, from all over the place, right? And that is the beauty of R&D, right? You don't have to be a commercial company building chips for you to actually have top researchers from Cyprus sitting into an R&D office. Mm-hmm. And there's other examples of companies that I can talk about, but I'd like to actually call out the very strong MOU we have with Israel on both R&D and innovation, and now we're under basically the leadership of the commissioner of electronic communications, George Mihailidis. They're now developing, with Israel and with the help of the US, a cybersecurity maritime center of excellence, right? So that we'll be able to develop our competency and our depth, and when we're protecting, I think, critical infrastructures coming in on the shipping industry, and many others, right? So we have an MOU with Israel. We have a very strong MOU with the UAE. Obviously, with India, we have a strong, let's say, agreement, strategic partnership agreement, 2025 to 2029. We're developing. We have one with Malta. We have another one with Japan, and we're now developing, I think, two additional ones. One is Singapore, which is in the process. So you can imagine that with the work that we're doing under the leadership of the president, it's not just bringing companies to Cyprus, it's creating those highways and freeways across the world so that Cypriot-based companies have access to talent, know-how, science, innovation across the globe, be it the United States of America, be it Australia, Israel, UK, India, right, and other countries there. And I think that is what is really causing, I think, this acceleration that you're seeing in the economy. We have the latest, I think the least, the best performing, I would say, unemployment rate in the last, let's say, a couple of decades. We're growing very fast and very steadily with the economy. Our talent is really booming. Our unemployment, as I said, is very low, but the most important part is now we see that, people come in from other parts of the world to work in Cyprus. Like, decorated, let's say, people from the United States or people from Canada or people from Australia, all coming to Cyprus because they're really realizing that it's not just, I think, the incentive. It's actually having the whole value proposition, which we do.
I'm based in Limassol, actually, and one of the things that I was super surprised when I came back to Cyprus 5-6 months ago was the fact that there's so many people that have come either from Europe or, as you've mentioned, maybe from the US or the UK, and they have really good jobs at international companies. And as you said, it's not just the taxation; it's the fact that there are opportunities here in Cyprus. But I actually wanted to talk a little bit about AI, and we've mentioned NVIDIA, which is at the center of the AI infrastructure. In my opinion, there are two kind of sides on the spectrum. There is firstly education, adoption, and then there is the other side of the spectrum, which is infrastructure. And you actually touched a little bit on both. You've talked a little bit about the talent that we have. You talked about chiplets, but where do you vision Cyprus in that spectrum between either research, education, adoption, and then infrastructure? Do you see Cyprus kind of leading somewhere or potentially setting itself somewhere?
Well, you're asking me a very timely question, mainly because of the strategy coming up, right? So, I think the AI is a sovereign, let's say, play, and it's a play that if you don't have infrastructure, you will, always be reliant on somebody else in the ecosystem to be giving you that right for you to be able to run. So I think infrastructure is important, human capital is important, but even more important is if you have an ecosystem, customers who are actually going to be using such technology for them to grow, right? So for us, from a Cypriot perspective, our incentives remain very, very competitive. So we're very attractive for companies who want to come build, experiment and ship in Cyprus. 3% IP box tax, right? 120% on the R&D. And all of the taxation and incentives for the high net worth individuals. Plus, I think the visas are very attractive. Now, from the infrastructure perspective, you're absolutely right. Our vision is we aspire to become, let's say, a regional hub in the Eastern Mediterranean when it comes to AI, right? Connecting basically the Middle East to Europe, etc. So what that necessarily means is we don't really have to build mega infrastructure projects of mega data centers, like a gigawatt, right? Or a 50 megawatt, let's say, data center. That might be probably bigger than what we may need in Cyprus, or maybe that we can really, I think, manage managed, I think, in a very, very organized manner. So for us, it's finding that balance between an infrastructure play where we do have data centers that will help us either, use technologies like AI or either have sovereign type of technology. And then through what we call partnerships and collaboration, we will develop those other parts of the value chain that will allow us to be very, very, very competitive. So essentially, we don't want to play the infrastructure game. We want to play the safe, trusted environment for applications to run, right, and to be tested for them to go into Europe. And that's a very, very different niche in itself.
And actually, I wanted to ask on that. When we think about the infrastructure, AI as a whole, and the role of Cyprus and the role that it's trying to play, what comes first in your opinion? Is it talent, or is it the infrastructure? Is it the products, the companies?
You need all three, right? I mean, remember that even if you have chips, right, and GPU or compute power, and you don't have people, there's not much you can do. But even if you have people and you don't have access to I think those enabling infrastructure blocks, you won't be able to do much unless you pay, I think, an arm and a leg to have subscriptions via cloud to the others. So our plan is basically on the strategies to basically develop them all at once, where things are being interconnected, and those playbooks are really going to help us eventually get by 2035 to a human plus world, right? Where you basically have humans coexisting or, I think augmented with, agents, with robots, with bots, particularly, I think, robotic technologies like RPAs and, co-pilots. And that will actually help us achieve something that is amazing, right? Imagine instead of talking if we use RPA or, one tool to do this, if our value is how many processes did we really change today so that we can create value faster? How are we capturing the value, right? And by that, right, you start asking the actual business, not the, I think overhead admin items that are out there. So I think we want to play in all categories, and the fact that we want to be known also for the trusted environment implies that we will be building, I think, more focus on the ISO 42000, I think AI security management and risk management system. And that's that. I think it's a balance.
And Mr. Dimitri, I want to change the topic now slightly. I know you work a little bit with startups, and I want to touch a little bit on the startup ecosystem here in Cyprus. And, I can take some examples, like, for example, Sweden is one country in the European Union which has created very successful startups, unicorns. Estonia would be another one. And having met as well a lot of Cypriot founders, sometimes it seems like Cypriot entrepreneurs, they leave Cyprus and they seek somewhere else, maybe the UK or the US to build their own startups. But it feels like the last few years, Cyprus has been trying to change this a little bit through initiatives, through funding. I want to firstly ask, are there any incentives that the government is currently undertaking to develop the startup ecosystem? And the second question is, would you envision a potential unicorn come out of Cyprus, a Cypriot-based, Cypriot-operated startup in the next, let's say, 10 years? Is that something that could happen?
Well, I mean, I think you've missed another podcast where I said this, but I truly believe that by 2035, we do have the possibility of having maybe 2 unicorns and a decacorn in Cyprus. So yes, there are existing startups that are really growing right now very, very fast. There are also startups, that are not startups anymore that, are headquartered abroad and they want to come back, and that's, I think, is a good sign. And yes, I think I'm also talking, to a very, very promising, let's say, unicorn that I think in 10 years' time, if they execute their business model, they will be in a different phase. So I think, yes, we currently have one of the most attractive startup ecosystems out there in Europe. You're going to see that there is going to be another surprise very soon in terms of rankings of the attractiveness of our ecosystem and where we are, right? So I think 3 years in a row where you see the numbers going up very fast, it means that, the work that we're doing is really, really paying off. From an incentive perspective, there are, some discussions that I'm not at liberty to I think hint more right now. But I think there is genuinely a holistic emphasis in really transforming the ICT sector in Cyprus.
That's awesome. And Mr. Dimitri, to the Cypriots of the diaspora, to the people that want to come back to Cyprus, what would be your message to them?
I never believed, right, when I was abroad, that we have people here who are, I think, designing solutions for the world. And this research I talked about, the Z-brain, what we're doing with the gliostomas, the research that was done between the Institute of Neurology and the CCO on really looking at, the impact of I think solar storms on the human body, another first in the world, right? And there are firsts. There are many firsts that are happening from Cyprus, right, towards the rest of the world. So for me, coming back was a refreshing experience, because I saw that, yes, on one side, you may have the culture with, things may be going a bit slower, but if you're willing to be patient and really look and uncover, you're going to see that there is a lot of technology and a lot of improvement happening in Cyprus. And it's, I think worth, stepping up and really taking the bat for it. For me, as I said before, I'm proudly a Cypriot above all. I'm very happy that, I think the government got an opportunity to help me when I needed some medicine abroad. And I'm really happy, that the Cypriot diasporians back in the UAE were very close to my family, and they made sure that, I had everything I needed to be able to fight the COVID disease. And I think I'm very fortunate being back, and I think trying to be part of this transformational journey, right? There isn't anything that is easy, no matter where you live. I know, I know that people will say life in UK or other city is different, right? And Cyprus is much slower, but the fact is that once you pace yourself in an environment and you can really prioritize health, work-life balance, right? Everything else just changes, and that is for me the beautiful story of Cyprus. That is why people, for example, with companies that have offices in Czech Republic, in Poland, in Netherlands, in Cyprus, and in Dubai, most of their people are in Cyprus, because, it's a very different thing to have, your office 300 meters away from the beach, or let's say 40 minutes from the mountain. So I think these elements are I think, crucial enablers.
100%. Thank you for sharing that, Mr. Dimitri. And I want to finish off the podcast with a question that I ask almost all my guests until now, which is, what is the best advice that you have ever received or heard of?
I will share with you three that are very close to my heart. One is listen carefully when others are talking before you make assumptions of what they might be saying. The second one is always don't put the horse ahead of the cart ahead of the course. Meaning that don't over I think analyze and make your own decisions before something happens. Eventually leading you to misjudge somebody else, right, while they are actually, in the process of really explaining to you what they think. And the other one is be kind to people and really, support them with an opportunity when you can actually open a door, because at some point of our lives, right, we will always need one door to open. And that's either us helping somebody who's younger who comes in, or it might be, somebody who might help us, reach another destination. And I think this act of kindness is something that really can help us open doors for, I think, every Cypriot out there. And I think building on these three, my passion, my vision, right, and my commitment is to, do whatever I can, at least from my perspective, so that each and every one of you has an opportunity to return back to Cyprus, right, and stay in your homeland if you wish.
Mr. Dimitri, firstly, thank you for your love, for your passion for your country, for giving back. And secondly, thank you so much for being here in the podcast. It was great having you. And that's everything for today. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.